Hi, folks. Ryan Honeyman here from Lift Economy. Many folks have come to us over the last 10 years and asked, how do I get more involved in creating an economy that works for the benefit of all life? They also ask, what skills and experiences do I need to help make this transition? So, 3 years ago, we created something called the Next Economy MBA to help address this and similar questions. Lift Economy's Next Economy MBA is an online course that's designed for entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, students, recent graduates, employees, and folks who want to learn more about transformational next economy strategies and businesses. Join the growing alumni network of nearly 250 alumni who've gone through this program and learned essential skills and hopefully built lifelong relationships for catalyzing businesses in the emergent and regenerative economy. So we encourage you to check out our course. You can go to lifteconomy.com/MBA. The next course, Cohort 7, starts on September 21st, 2021. So once again, go to www.lifteconomy.com/MBA. And now, on with the show. Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy.
Thank you, Jabir, for being here today. I'm very excited to chat with you.
Thanks for having me.
And I'd love to start just hearing a little bit about your background and your story. What brought you to the work that you're doing today?
I guess it's a podcast-worthy story. So right now I'm working with one partner in a project called Answer Partners. We're a nonprofit and entrepreneurial fundraising consulting firm. My background is I've been working for about 15 years in the nonprofit sector doing fundraising. So social justice, anti-war, anti-nuke, civil rights. And I got into that really as a result of 9/11. So as a practicing Muslim, I had an entire career before 9/11 and really being forced to confront kind of politics and just realizing it wasn't something that you just kind of vote on, but actually the way that the world responds to events and, these protests and rallies, and I never really knew how to get involved with them. So the only way that I found was to actually go to work for one of these social justice groups that was called Peace Action. So I joined Peace Action as a street canvasser, as a door-to-door canvasser, making phone calls to their members, and so it ended up being something that I enjoyed doing. I learned a lot about lobbying and politics in a way that a college course probably couldn't have prepared me for. And so my career kind of started there, just kind of on the ground and being really well trained and invested in kind of in how nonprofit fundraising, development works, some governance. And from there, I just kind of moved into different types of fundraising for different types of organizations. So started at a small peace and justice lobby, then moved on to work for University of California at Berkeley, running one of their fundraising departments. And kind of every job that I've had has been kind of an additional endorsement of kind of base skills and then kind of learning how to do different things. So I spent the last 15 years just kind of putting together a body of work that I feel has prepared me, and also it's kind of helped prepare a large cadre of people that I've worked with for kind of looking at the face of fundraising a little bit differently, looking at the audience of fundraising differently. And what we're looking to do now is to take advantage of all these buzzwords that are out with diversity and inclusion and kind of how these are all hot topics, and especially where we live in the Bay Area, the tech sector, um, but also just the current political landscape just being so, you know, it's unfortunate all the different the different kind of events that are taking place that are reminding us all of, race and gender and class and all these different things, and racist white supremacy. But they are also opportunities for us to say, let's not just talk about it, but let's insert ourselves as part of the solution. Um, and so the work of Ansar Partners is first and foremost, um, it's to elevate the work of people, particularly women of color, but African American entrepreneurs and nonprofit leaders, is to elevate their work and to make sure that the funding that exists, these billions and billions of dollars of funding, actually ends up in people who are doing the most important work. And so the easiest and kind of the biggest impact that we're going to have is actually in helping to transfer some of that wealth.
Wonderful. So elevating the work and really showcasing manifesting the possibility for a more diverse and inclusive economy that creates more equitable outcomes, and leveraging these enormous kind of collections of wealth that have been generated, over generations through generally through exploitation and the business as usual economy. And thankfully, there are a number of people who are starting to, kind of look at how they could leverage their resources that they have or that they've inherited, and to dedicate them to these better outcomes. And so, can you maybe share a little bit more about, how do you find, organizations that you are supporting with fundraising? How do they come to you, maybe? And, if somebody were interested in, connecting with you, what would that look? How would it look like? How would it work? And I know this is also a newer venture, so if some of those details are still coming together, that's fine too. But I'm curious.
Oh, sure. I think that's I think the model that we're using right now is probably one that's going to be consistent for how we work. So how people find us is really based upon our reputation. So it's myself and a partner, John Anner. John has been a nonprofit leader for over 30 years. And so between our reputations and really, I've been working on the development and fundraising side, and John has really been in the CEO and executive director side. One of the wonderful things is, the Bay Area is as big as it is, and California as big as it is, the fundraising world as big as it is, it's still kind of, based upon who you know and relationships. And so word of mouth, even before this venture was official, word of mouth was something that, as we were beginning to have conversations about how we would work, we'd be getting an email, hey, I hear you guys are doing this. Do you have an opportunity to take a call about this? And so it's really going to be, as far as I'm concerned, it's going to be our reputation and our word of mouth, and our ability to show that we can be successful with this group of, and again, primarily focusing on African American women of color, people of color led organizations and businesses as well. Really being able to prove our success with highlighting them and raising them up as well. One of the ways that I think is going to be kind of looking forward to how we will work is also in not just highlighting and supporting those organizations, but is also in supporting the fundraisers and kind of changing the face of philanthropy. And I'm sure you're very familiar with this as well, Kevin. Most meetings about money look very white. I mean, they're just white spaces. The people who know each other. They come from this this kind of long train of exploitation, go back generationally. And so I'm very, very fortunate to have been invited in or broken into these spaces where just not a lot of people look like me. And so my ability to kind of there's the metaphor of the spook who sat by the door, or just these to be the person that kind of opens the door, sits by the door, and helps to elevate new fundraisers, new entrepreneurs, and really to help to bring kind of the diversity that everybody talks about into those spaces is one of the two ways that we want to work. The second is, it's easy to talk about diversity. It's easy to talk about, the ways that, we want to change this and change that. But, there's a reason why everybody talks about it and the results don't happen. It's because it's really hard to do. So the second of the two ways that we really want to focus on working is in not just preparing the fundraisers, but also preparing these organizations and saying, it's not just enough to hire somebody and to think it's going to be enough. You have to really commit yourself to some cultural change organizationally as well. And so for us, looking not just at raising money as the solution, but also in kind of changing the face of these organizations and changing the face of philanthropy, I think is going to bring about a lot of the change that we're looking for as a culture.
I'm so glad that you added that. So, it's not, in order to transform the economy, we need to look not only at the composition of the enterprises and organizations and the leadership, elevating more people of color and women of color into these resourced roles of leadership, but also looking at the nature of the ecosystem around fundraising, funding, and philanthropy in general. And you're so correct. Your observations are so spot on with and consistent with our observations of our work. And so you have this a dual or multifaceted mission, which I think is extraordinarily timely and of course critical to making that next economy that works for everyone with no one left out. So
it would be really easy for us to just focus upon, just generating funds, because it's kind of always been our responsibility with every, job and position that we've had. But yeah, I think that's where the opportunity for change, just not just making this company stand out different from other ones, but actually changing the landscape is really going to come from recognizing that right now the risk is, for me as an employee of these different companies, the risk is if I don't do well in my job culturally, just because of racial norms and stereotypes, et cetera, the chances of them hiring another African American male into the position, development director, what have you, just go down. It's one of those things that happens where right now, racially people are kind of representing the entire culture. So you have to perform outside of just yourself. And it shouldn't be that way, but that's just kind of the way that it is. And so for us to really, to have the kind of impact that we want to have, we have to kind of acknowledge that, address it, and then change it by kind of preparing the organizations as well for what it's like to actually diversify, to take a quote unquote chance on a director who may not look like what you expect, may not come from a background that you expect.
Well, thank you for your courage in endeavoring to do that, because I can imagine that is not a simple, easy task, and it's a lot of significant potential weight to hold, to carry. So I'm just really grateful for the courage that you're demonstrating and taking that on, and as far as I can tell, the excellent job you're already doing and continue to do. I'm curious if you could share a little bit about how you see in your life this transition from, say, work on aspects around, say, peace action and some of the fundraising and resourcing NGOs and nonprofits working on change in one way to this piece on economy and enterprise. I remember when we first met, we talked a bit about some of the tenets and principles of Islamic economics. And I'm curious how your background and experience, kind of how this transition sits for you and how you see the role of economy and enterprise in societal transformation, or what role you see.
Oh yeah, just give me a really easy question. Why don't you? No, that's really useful, because I think that's been like finding my personal values and my religious values, and fitting myself into a professional life. And I think all of that has been kind of part of my my transition in this career. It's like, how do I fit into these things? And as I learn more and grow more, learning what is capitalism. I mean, those of us, everybody lives in this country. Everybody lives in the capitalist system, but really, the ability to actually define it is something that takes a lot of education. And let me just try to dive into that question. Um, the beginning of my career, as I said, I kind of started over and kind of wanted anything that kind of got me into the world of activism. I wanted to be in these rallies, wanted to be in these protests. This is during the Afghanistan war and the Iraq war, and I just knew I wanted to be in, and I didn't really care how. I didn't really care if, what the working conditions were, the wages were. I just really wanted to be in. It's just very blessed to have a situation where I found a nonprofit that was about kind of investing into me and giving me skills and these workshops and just training and advancing me within the organization. But as I moved forward in my career, you start making more money, you start having more options, 401k, et cetera. Being more comfortable financially, and it's one of those things where it allows you to either, let me speak for myself, it allowed me to either live closer to my ideals or to kind of distance myself from them. So when you go from making minimum wage to 20 an hour to 30 an hour to 40 an hour, et cetera, you have an opportunity to either, I had an opportunity to either say, I figured out all the other stuff and just do what I can do, just get a mortgage and do the thing. But for me, it really became an opportunity to say, as a Muslim, these are the things that I claim to believe in. The concept that I'm sure everybody, whether they understand it or not, understands, familiar with, is a word called Sharia, or as you might hear it on TV, is Sharia, which is just law. It's the laws of Islam. And there are laws for Islam about money. There are laws for Islam about kind of every aspect of life. And so where decisions that I made really early in my career, having a smaller salary might not have been might have been as in keeping with the tenets, specifically when it comes to concepts like interest and riba is what it's called in Arabic. I just didn't have the comfort to be able to say I'm not going to stick to this and stick to that. But as my financial health has improved over the last decade and a half, it is something that I've been able to stick to more comfortably. But what it's meant is, 1400 years ago when Islam was created, there were no banks. There was people put their money in treasure chests or dug them out in holes in the back or put them in sacks of money, and lenders were individuals. And so all these things that we live in now with like credit scores, and, banks running the world, it takes a lot of creativity and flexibility for kind of Muslims in the modern world to figure out like how are we going to live. We're supposed to stay away from interest. How do we buy cars? And we're not necessarily all going to be able to pay $30,000 cash. And so diving more into what does exist, especially where I live in the Bay Area, with Islamic lending or Islamic leasing, or or even there are banks that now just have Sharia compliant lending. It's something that's allowed me to be closer to my own values, where it may be a little bit less convenient. It's just easier to go into a big bank and just say, hey, cut me a loan for this car and I'll pay you $30,000 for a $25,000 loan or whatever it is. But the real reality is that we do have the ability to make other decisions. And for me, I'm actually kind of happy that I've been able to live closer to that the farther that I've come. And maybe even that's the reason why I've been able to progress so far, as somebody who believes in God and believes in wherever your listeners are, the whole aspect of karma. So if you do good, good comes back to you. even starting out with this business is not one that's just out to make profit. As a matter of fact, if we want to just make profit, there's probably other ways that we could do so more comfortably. But yeah, that's I don't know how good of an answer that is, but in looking at where we are today and the type of work that we want to do and the type of people that we want to work with, it definitely has to be something that is in keeping with you know being non-exploitative. That's kind of one of the major tenets, one of the major requirements of dealing financially. So, no matter what situation you're in as a lender or as a borrower, you can't exploit and you can't be exploited. And so for us, it's any work that we're doing, any clients that we're finding, they have to be people that are doing work that we believe in. They have to be people who are people that we believe in. And so that's I believe the start of how we're going to change some of the some of the face of how even consulting works. Just to come in and make an assessment and say you should do this, you should do that, you should do this, give you a report, say goodbye. But actually saying like, hey, we're going to make an assessment, yes, we're going to give you a report, yes, but then we're also going to work with you to make this happen. And working side by side with this organization, it does involve being a bit more, I want to say necessarily risk. It's not a more risky situation, but it is something that allows less risk. That's what it is. Less risk on the behalf of the person who's actually paying us the money, because we're not just going to drop off a report in a binder, but we're actually going to be doing work. And that's something that's definitely in keeping with the values of Islam and the values of anybody, hopefully, that wants to live in a better place. I hope that was a decent answer.
I think that's a great answer. I think, some of the things that I heard there that resonate for me is that looking at the principles and tenets of Islamic economics and actually incorporating them and see how they intersect with your work, actually create an ethical frame for not only how you look at the way capital could be utilized, and then how you've embraced that personally as you've been able to access more reciprocity for your great work, and how you've incorporated that into your life, but then there's an ethical boundary now in your work, not only in how you look at directing resources or capital into economy, but also even the way you do consulting. Just this ethical frame, which I think our listeners, the Next Economy Now listeners, are very interested in this ethical frameworks, even if we're not familiar with a term like riba and kind of the depth of the long-term thinking around these types of principle-based approaches to how economy could work. I think there's kind of an intuitive sense that this is really important, that there's an incredible amount of value here that's maybe been highly marginalized in in say America or North America. And I think there's a curiosity at the least, and in some cases a reverence for these types of tenets that exist, but are not necessarily common in, like you said, the kind of capitalist society that we find ourselves immersed in. Curious if you have any other reflections, and I don't want to put you on the spot. I know you've done amazing work, but you're not a Islamic economic scholar or anything like that.
I am not. But in preparing for this conversation, I one of the things that I actually did really think about, and it actually resonates with what you just said there, is that a lot of my values, a lot of things that I believe in, a lot of the framework that I operate in, it's a spiritual thing. So this thing, there's a phrase in Islam, "Samina wa ata'na," which is we hear and we obey, and that's generally the place religiously where I come from. And I understand that there's folks who are non-religious or maybe agnostic, or just don't necessarily want to hear things from a dogmatic point of view. But what you just said is kind of where we can all meet in the middle, which is everybody hopefully listening to this show can acknowledge that the current system is not something that works. And whether you want to take it from Judeo-Christian, from a Abrahamic religious standpoint, or from something that's just kind of more based in, um, just like the co-op system. You guys have a lot of businesses on that are operating as worker-owned co-ops. Um, we can all kind of acknowledge that, we can either kind of work under the way that things are, or we can kind of say that, well, the way things are don't work, and we should all be open to looking at anything that's non-exploitative, anything that's putting power in the hands of people who are the most of production. Uh, and for me, it's if it looks like fairness, if it looks like equity, if it looks like equality, uh, regardless of where it comes from, it's something that I want to learn from and want to integrate. Even if it's not something, as I said, I'm not a scholar in any way whatsoever. I'm just simply a practicing Muslim male. But as long as it looks like it's something that fits within, my values, then kind of that's how I want to live. And especially, talking about work, it's something you put 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80 hours a week into. It has to feel good. It has to feel right.
I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, I think that we might have an emerging set of semantic descriptions of these value orientations and what feels right and more equitable and works for everyone. And some of those descriptors might be secular. Some of them might come from religious traditions and communities. And at kind of the core, they're all speaking towards a transformation from a system that clearly is broken. We
Absolutely.
have millions of people who will be hungry today, and all of our environmental ecosystems are in rapid decline. So we have a self-evident kind of problem, and there's probably a lot more common ground, and I think there's a fruitful field to explore some of the prior art of what communities around the world have embraced as ethical boundaries or values to operate within, and in terms of how they do economic activity, how they work with resources or capital or goods and services. So I think Islamic economics, I know there's a curiosity amongst many of the Next Economy Now listeners, and I appreciate you sharing any of the ideas there that you've already shared. And I'm curious if there's any ideas you want to elaborate on, or I'm also curious about what are you excited by these days? What are the things you're seeing, the projects you're seeing? What kind of is inspiring you, either in your work or even outside of the direct field that you're working in?
Answering the last part first, because I just think it stands out the most. What's exciting, and it's it's also what's depressing, which is just the news. You don't have to look for what I do, which is taking um, organizations or entrepreneurs and trying to highlight the need and the importance for them, and trying to tell the public or their audience or these private funders, this is why this is important. Um, since 2001, and especially the last 4 or 5 years, issues of racism, racial justice, social justice, and civil rights are unfortunately forced into people's heads. I mean, just headlines every day. It's social media stories, viral videos every single day. These issues, whether they're passive racism or aggressive white supremacy. I mean, at the time you and I are talking now, there's shooting at a restaurant, and it's just no matter when anybody's listening to this program, there's a new story that's kind of highlighting just inequity and racism. Look outside whatever city you live in, like these tent cities. I mean, just you don't have to search for kind of reasons why quote unquote the work of diverse people is needed and is necessary. And so it makes what we do a lot easier, because the convincing part is just done, unfortunately, by the horrible job that our society's done of equity and equality. And so, I'm excited about the fact that there are a lot of, and as far as I'm concerned, there are enough people doing enough work kind of without having access to funds and to the world of private philanthropy, that if we find ways to kind of elevate their voices and elevate their work, and I would say again, specifically the work of African American women, but also women of color, people of color, entrepreneurs, and profits, um, they have the solutions. I mean, if you want to look at these tent cities sprawling around, I mean, there are people, with budgets of $0, who are at least doing something to feed, clothe, provide warmth, provide food, shelter, hygiene to many of these encampments, to literacy and taking youth out of the school to prison pipeline. I mean, there's just enough work being done by people who do not have access, to these MacArthur grants, Ford, Kellogg, et cetera, foundations. And so the way that we look at it is that, if we were able to kind of, to highlight their work and to put it together in a good story and to present it to people who have the ability to write a check that can absolutely make or break, the work regionally, or nationwide. I really do believe that, as bleak as things look, if you kind of just keep your head in, this 24-hour news cycle, there's just a lot of opportunity for good. And I feel like even the people who could do more and aren't, I'm not going to become pessimistic about their willingness to do more, because I haven't asked them on behalf of this organization or this entrepreneur yet. And so I think that's the way, that's the optimism that I have going to any potential organization or situation or funder meeting, is that I'm never going to do something that I don't believe in. I think there's incredible. Unfortunately, there's unlimited need in this also prosperous country, and if we're able to kind of have some culturally sensitive and just on top of that, just really compelling reasons why you're doing good in Houston. Imagine what we do with Texas. Imagine what we do with and I really do feel like the opportunity and the need is there, that people would be willing to do so if we are able to highlight and uplift these voices.
I really like that observation. It's it does seem. I mean, I know myself, and I hear from many others to kind of be able to even tolerate the like you said, the news cycle. And it's not like what's happening in the news cycle wasn't happening yesterday or last year or 10 years ago. It's, tragically this type of systemic oppression and exploitation has been part of, affluent world culture, but definitely North America and definitely the United States since the United States has been a thing. It's just, maybe it is becoming more visible now, and more the case for why a more diverse and inclusive economy, a more diverse and inclusive society, a more equitable society is important. Maybe that case is becoming, I mean, it's already embarrassingly self-evident to anybody who's able to kind of look at it, but maybe with media and social media, I don't know what the condition is, but I like what you're saying, because it's true that when we work with quote unquote impact investors and philanthropists, and we look at some of the charitable foundations and organizations who are making grants and gifts, it's rare now to see a funder who's oriented without having some type of social equity component in their thinking or their area of focus. Mm-hmm. And I think that is kind of new. I mean, maybe your perspective on it will be better, but that does feel like it's shifting. And I guess it's not universal yet, and we're not quite there where everybody's on board. but we are seeing that more and more. And it's interesting the way you're saying that that's something to be actually hopeful and inspired about, given all this tremendous amount of suffering and hurt and systemic inequity.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of energy spent, especially, those of us in the social media world on, whether these things are, like you said, is it worse? Is it the same? Is it just highlighted because of social media? Is it, but, for me, it doesn't really matter. It's the fact that it's resonating and it's on people's
Right.
tongues. And, all you have to do is say the name, and it's unfortunate. It's horrific that all you have to do is to say the name of a city, and then people can think of, whatever the inequity or the tragedies associated there.
Yeah.
But to me, that's also opportunity. And I agree with you. Like, the fact that the social justice component with funders, it doesn't really matter why. It's just opportunity for us. And yes, they should have been aware of it 20 years ago. Yes, they should have, opened this up 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. But it doesn't matter because right now we have that opportunity. And so, yeah, it's either for me, seeing it as opportunity or just staying mired in, this debate, and almost playing, a different version of the oppression Olympics, just the whole like, well, they should have done it 5 years ago. It's been this bad since, Columbus came here. But right now we have an opportunity. Right now the doors are open, and I'd like to blow those doors open. The way that I can make that change, is with philanthropy.
And it certainly seems like a potent lever to be working on in the whole possible places to put energy within transforming the economy and society at large. So again, I'm grateful for the work you're doing. I'm curious if there's anything for thinking of Next Economy Now listeners listening to this. Is there anything that you could imagine how they might be able to support your work in any way, or just become more aware of what you're doing? I know some of this new venture with John is relatively new. Is there places where we can learn more and how we can help in any way? Or is that still forthcoming?
I would say the most direct way, especially as far as this company can be useful and people can be useful to this company, is really to think about the people close to you, the organizations close to you, locally, regionally, the food bank, the shelter, uh, uh, somebody doing get out the boat work kind of with a shoestring budget, and thinking about, especially if those are ran by women, especially if those are ran by people of color. um, Another kind of neat aspect to this business is entrepreneurs that still have a social mission. So maybe somebody who's doing some kind of tutoring program, even if it's for profit, it still is serving something that is going to make this world and where you live a better place. And kind of thinking about, like, if those people are doing good work now, like, what would they do? What would they be able to do if they were, not doing it on the side of their career? What if they were fully funded, or what if they are funded? What if they were able to actually hire a staff? If they have a staff, what if they would hire, more staff? And really thinking about, like, the organizations that you support, the people that who do good work, and if they align with your values. I'm going to assume anybody listening to this podcast, and is willing to think about new ways, economically or financially. Um, you know, those are the kind of folks that I feel like we want to be in touch with. Everybody's not going to be a good fit. We do have a limit to what we can take, as far as our own capacity. But there's still a benefit in being able to share resources and just being able to be of support, even if it's just advice, or just connecting people with resources as well. So, for those who have those kinds of people and organizations in mind that generally tend to fly under the radar, but you know them personally or intimately, feel free to put them in contact with us, because what we want to do is we want to be of even though it's a consulting firm, we still want to have an impact, and it's going to be based upon people, organizations that are doing, really, really good and important work, and that with and given an influx of resources and support, would be able to triple and quadruple and double their impact. So, if they fit your values and kind of the values that it sounds like we're speaking about here, we'd love to speak with them.
Wonderful. That's a great request. And there are so many amazing organizations doing incredible work and really challenging work that are under-resourced. So I encourage all listeners to be thinking about that and to see how we can increase the impact of those organizations by helping them become resourced. Is there anything else, Jabir, that you think you would like to share about for Next Economy Now listeners?
There's nothing I can think of. No.
Well, I really appreciate your time and sharing about your journey and your work and the important perspective and the values that influence your current work and your perspective. And again, gratitude for the role that you're playing in transforming not only how well-deserving organizations become resourced, but how the power structures of the resourcing world, the world of philanthropy and giving, transforming that as well. Again, I do believe that's courageous work, and I'm really grateful that you're taking a stand for it.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. To listen to all of our episodes, go to lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's LIFT economy.com/podcast. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter at lifteconomy.com/newsletter. Please also rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.